Hi, this is Dr. Jacqueline Kerbeck, the President, Founder, and Chief Listening Officer here at our network at USA Global TV and Radio. Thank you so much for your loyalty. Thank you so much to all of our guests, to our team members, to our sponsors, and to all of our elevated listeners. Here at USA Global TV and Radio, we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. We celebrate all of our team members, all of our guests, and all of our sponsors from around the world who come and lead their lives with their hearts to help other people walk into their greatness. If you'd like to be a guest on any of our shows, please go over to our website, usaglobaltv.com, and book your session. Please contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com and subscribe to our channel.
Welcome back to I'm Spiritual But. We are so happy to have you joining us again today for this incredible show. Hello, Roger.
Hey, Ann, how are you today?
I am good. How's your weather over there in Texas?
Well, we've had bad storms. Yesterday there were tornadoes and everything, but so far as we know, everyone we know has been safe. So it's been very fortunate.
Oh, good. It's beautiful where I am today. You know where I am. I'm up in the mountains today in the woods, and I'm looking out my window as we speak, and I see beautiful snowflakes coming down through the forest. It's just gorgeous. Beautiful, beautiful. Everyone, we have an amazing guest for you today, and I want to thank you again for joining the show. Please help us spread the good word. Please like and subscribe. This is meant to be an interactive show. This is a show for the viewers, not for us. So if you can leave us comments or questions during the show, you can enter those. We can see them on our end, or you can always email us your comments and questions by going to our website, which is in the notes. I'm Spiritual But is a show that has a very unique vision. And I just want to read you what our written vision is again today. And that is to reflect the light of every viewer so they can live their dreams more fully and trust their own spiritual path more profoundly. And it's really a show about inclusive spirituality. It's not a show where we're trying to convert anyone to anything. It's a show where we're trying to create a new global conversation around spirituality and finding what works for each of us in the best way, whether you're religious or not religious. How can you honor that beautiful part of who you are? So, Roger, tell us about our special guest today.
I am so happy to have this special guest who is a personal friend of mine on our show today. So Reverend Vita Como is an ordained interfaith minister with a Master of Divinity from Emerson University. She is also a licensed Unity teacher and a frequent speaker on topics of interfaith spirituality. Vita is licensed in teaching and counseling with 25 years experience in technical career counseling, professional development, fundraising, and industry partnership collaboration. She's a dynamic speaker, and I can say that from personal experience because I've heard her many times, and workshop group facilitator who serves as an industry expert to local, statewide, and national news outlets on matters related to technical and professional employment, trends, and career development. Vita is a certified Texas Master Naturalist with a specialty in native and drought-resistant landscapes. She has a ranch in southwest of Columbus, Texas, where she raises hardwood trees and native plants. Would you all please welcome our guest, Vita Como.
Hi, Vita. How are you? Welcome to the show. Oh, you can't hear us. Okay. So let's make sure she's unmuted. Maybe Jacqueline can help us out. Okay, we'll work on that real quick because we heard her a few minutes ago.
Yeah. So while Vita's working, let me give you a little bit of background. So here's an interesting experience that I had with Vita that really inspired me to invite her to the show. So she read my book, Divine Destiny, which is a dialogue with God. And she came up to me after reading it and she said, I enjoyed your book, Roger, but I would not have a dialogue with God. And I thought, well, that's interesting. How come? Vita, are you with us yet? Vita? Okay, so she said she was not able to have a dialogue with God. And I said, why? And she said, because I believe God is principle. God is principle. I found that concept fascinating, and I'd like to explore it more when we finally get through to be able to interview with her.
Yes, and I think Jacqueline may put her backstage for a moment.
Okay.
If you could maybe shoot her a text, Roger, since we're all working remotely today, and just let her
Okay.
know that she can she has someone with her. I believe Vita does, who can help her. So and that's amazing, and I can't wait to talk more about that. And in the meantime, as you all know, we start and end each show with a quote that we ask each of our guests to provide. And we bookend the show and our theme that way. So Vita's quote today that she sent us is from the Tao Te Ching. And it says this: if you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich. And something else that she was talking with us about before the show is getting used to asking the questions, being comfortable still having questions even unanswered around your spirituality, which I thought was really phenomenal, because how often we think, well, I'll finally connect spiritually once I can figure this out and this out and this out, as opposed to maybe seeking, but also knowing we may not always understand everything.
I love that she works with the question and lives with the questions. And that led to a class that Vita and I co-hosted several times at local churches. And it came from our conversation from Divine Destiny. As we talked, and she told me that, she believed that God is principle. She said, I have had an observation. She said, many people are good at talking to God.
Mm.
But most of us struggle on how to talk about God.
Mm-hmm.
And so she encouraged us to consider the possibility of starting a course where we just invited members to talk about God. What is their
Wow.
understanding of God? Who or what is God to them? And how do you express that in such a way that you can be open and loving and respectful of other people's various perceptions of who or God is? And so we did that for several times. We gathered groups of people, sometimes at a church, like before the church service, we just gathered people and said, we're just going to invite you to come in and to talk about God. And they did. And most of them, you will not be surprised, Anne, to discover that most of them talked about their spiritual journey and how their understanding of God grew and evolved and became more multidimensional the farther along they got on their own spiritual journey, whether it was connected to a religious practice or not.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, okay, we're going to try to bring Vita back in and see if she is with us now, if she can hear us. Can you hear us, Vita? You cannot. So she was able to hear when we were testing before. So that's really a shame. Hopefully she has someone there. Try taking these out and unplug it. Let's see if maybe we can use her speaker. I think we can hear you, possibly.
Okay, now I can hear.
Excellent. We're going to give this a shot as is. So thank you so much. So we were just talking about the quotation that you sent for us today. If you realize that you have enough, you are truly rich, from the Tao Te Ching. And I'm just going to jump in and say, how has this question helped shape or change your spiritual journey, Vita?
Well, because I'm a perfectionist, and there's always more. There's a way to do things better, a way to, not necessarily an acquisition thing, but I'll get another degree, I'll take another class, I'll get another certification. And I began to question, what's enough? Now, when am I going to get to the point where I realize that what is enough? And
That's
then,
amazing.
and then revel in that.
That's so beautiful. And something that you mentioned the other day too, which was about the ability to live with the questions. I love how you said that.
Right. That was a real breakthrough for me because I was always striving for answers.
That's amazing. Me too.
Some things don't have answers. And it became a real spiritual journey for me to get comfortable in living in the question.
Wow.
And just, yeah, that's a question, and I'll get some insight into it, maybe, or maybe I won't, or maybe not in this lifetime. However,
right.
Put it out there, but to not. I'm trying to move out of the striving mode.
That's amazing.
Because it becomes unbalanced. So I'm a member of Unity Church, and we have a ceremony every year that's called the White Stone Ceremony, which is white stone is what in Jerusalem they used to give prisoners when they were released from prison. And you got to write your new name on it. And so we have a burning bowl, which is you release all of the stuff you want to get rid of. And then the next ceremony is you have a white stone and you write on it. And my white stone words for this year were balance and easy.
Wow. I love that. I love that.
Right. So I'm going to try and live in balance. And I promised myself I would make it easy.
I love that. Balance and easy. And then, Roger, why don't you go ahead? I know we had another question for her.
So I really wanted to follow up on that white stone because it's a fascinating idea. I've done the white stone ceremony many times. When you go into that ceremony, do you have a word in mind? And then does it change? Or when you're in the process and you go into meditation and ask for the word, how does it show up for you? How do you know that's the word you want?
So we do. Some people don't ever get a word. I mean, the word could come a week later. The balance one came to me in meditation during the ceremony. And then I just kept living with it. I just kept, trying to figure out how I'm going to make balance work. Right?
You're speaking to me here.
And so, and then putting that into meditation, it's like, this is not feeling the way that I wanted to feel. It became apparent that the second word needed to be easy, that I just needed to let it happen. And so that's how I got the two words. They didn't come together, but they came as a result of one another, I guess is the best way to say it.
That's so beautiful.
It's a very powerful ceremony because sometimes people go in with a word, it's like, I want my word for this year to be, and the universe says, not happening.
Right. Yeah. You have to go in without having a preconceived idea.
Right.
Well,
I too, anyway.
I think, I'm not sure if you were able to hear us, but Roger had a most beautiful introduction for you. And we're so happy to have you here. And we're so happy that we can all hear each other and we have no tornadoes today. So just briefly, in a few sentences, Vita, share with us your spiritual life story and how it brought you to who you are and the work you do today.
So I am a child of an Italian immigrant family. Grew up in New York City, had 12 years of parochial school, raised I'm a cradle Catholic, or was a cradle Catholic, and got a great education. And then went off to university and went to the City University of New York, and then went on to Columbia to get a degree in finance. And I started my work life on Wall Street, and I began to see the craziness of living in a world that said what title you have, how much money you have, what it says on the door to your office, what all of that means. And that's how you get to judge what your worth is. So I had walked away. parochial school education does a couple of things, one of which is it either makes you an agnostic or it makes you really, 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 really Catholic. So I was, and I never could figure out how a tradition could require you to check your brain at the door when you went into the sanctuary. I loved the ritual. So the ritual, the theater of it had a certain attachment for me. Learned to read Greek and Latin, learned to chant the Mass in Latin. So all of that was really, that theater of it was great, but the theology didn't work. So I walked away. And like a lot of people, I'm a child of the 60s. And so I began exploring lots of different traditions and going to all kinds of lectures, going to retreats. And then one day someone I worked with invited me to go to a lecture at Lincoln Center on a Sunday morning. And it was with Eric Butterworth. And Eric Butterworth is a metaphysician, and he he's passed, but he did this lecture, and he talked about intrinsic value. That nothing on the outside defines what your value is. That your value lies in who you are and how you show up. That was the basic message that day. And I found that very attractive. Because that, being the control person that I am, at least that was something I had some control over. I mean, I could work on that. Yeah. And so then began the path that ultimately led me to unity, which is the tradition that I follow in terms of my own personal spiritual path. But I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter what path you're on. You just have to pick one, and you just have to do it and do the work. So Barbara Smith, who was my minister a long time ago, she had this metaphor that I loved, which was all of the religions of the world are like spokes on a wheel. And God and truth is the hub, and all of the different traditions are spoke. And when you live out on the rim, it looks like there's a lot of difference between them. There's space in there. And you get to say that one's different from that one, and that one's different from that one. But if you get on the spoke and you move toward the middle, you can't see the differences. Because at the hub, it's all the same. So when people tell me, should I join, people ask me, should I join this tradition? Should I study? It's like, it doesn't matter. It really and truly doesn't matter. Just pick one that resonates with you. Try it out. If it doesn't feel comfortable, try a different one. And in the end, the realization is that it's all the same. And that's why my commitment to interfaith is so strong. It's because once we learn how to language between traditions, once we learn how to talk to each other respectfully about our different faith traditions, about our different rituals, about our different fundamental belief systems, we come to realize that there's really no gap. And that conversation is really difficult for some people. So does that answer that question?
Yes, no, that's absolutely amazing. No, thank you so much. And we actually have a comment today from Uganda to thank you for the show, says Nagwira. I'm not sure, Nuwagrira. Thank you so much for watching. We are so happy to have you joining us here from the other side of the world, and we appreciate you so much. So yeah, that's really amazing, having that that spiritual inclusivity, and that what Roger and I always talk about, one of the intentions behind this show, which was to help us get closer to the spoke, which is, I love this visual, and find our commonalities in our spirituality and our connection with the divine instead of focusing on the differences. Roger?
Vida, beyond the theory of what you just shared, I know you have quite a bit of first-person experience doing the work of interacting with other faith traditions, especially through Faiths Together. I know you wanted to talk about that. Would you tell the audience a little bit about what Faiths Together is and how it has impacted your spiritual journey?
So Faiths Together is an organization in the Woodlands. It may exist elsewhere. I don't really know that, but it exists in the Woodlands, and it is a meeting. We meet once a month of all of the faith traditions that are represented in the Woodlands, with the exception of the Baptists and the Catholics. They're not part of the group.
Because they chose not to be, right? They were invited.
Right. But we have Mormons, we have people from the Baha'i tradition, we have Hindus, we have Buddhists, we have Muslims, we have New Thought people, we have people from more traditional church. We have a synagogue that is a conservative synagogue, which is a really interesting contribution. And we do projects together. We do a big project in November, which is a celebration of diversity, where we do a Thanksgiving. We call it our Thanksgiving for Thanks for Us celebration we do every November. But it shows up in community. What we were talking about the other day was, Roger, you'll remember this, when our sanctuary flooded.
I was just going to share that story. Go ahead, please do.
But our sanctuary flooded months, maybe just a couple of months after we opened our new sanctuary. There was a hurricane and there was a flood, and our sanctuary had 4 feet of water in it. And people came to help. People came to help pull up the carpet, stronger backs. We're an older congregation, and so we don't have that many strong backs. And they came, and the thing that was amazing was they came without being asked. They just showed up. And then the people from the Baha'i church, the Baha'i temple really, came, and they brought meals and they fed the workers. And so we didn't have to do any of that. And so what we did after all the work was done, and we came to the place where we were going to rededicate our sanctuary, our Roger's husband, Jerry, who was our minister at the time, invited all of the leaders of the various faith communities to come in and give a blessing to our new sanctuary out of their tradition. And we had, what, Roger, I think about 11 or 12 different
I believe so.
Yeah, up there. And each of them did their blessing in their own language, in their own, the imam did it in Arabic, the rabbi did it in Hebrew. It was wonderful, and it created in the sanctuary an incredible energy that I think it still reverberates. But it also created for our congregation a statement of this is where we show up in the world. This is how we show up in the world. And the conversations that we have in our Faiths Together meeting sometimes are just pretty mundane things, like, what do we do about the traffic? Trying to get in and out of the church. But like one day I had a conversation with the imam. So the imam I asked, and he allowed me to bring a class that I was teaching to a Friday worship service. It's a very conservative mosque. And so he had to jump through some hoops to get us invited. And then he was very gracious in that he came to the class one day and gave us a class in how to dress, to wear something to cover your head, nothing sleeveless. He went through that whole drill. And then, so in their service, the women are behind a screen, but he let the women sit to the side, which was a big deal, to sit in the main meeting hall, but we were off to the side. So all of these we were about 12 of us, I think, and we sat off to the side. And he did his homily in English so that we would understand talking about how little non-Muslims know about the Quran. And the conversation revolved around the fact that for Muslims, the Quran isn't the Quran if it's not in Arabic. And so that they don't view translations as legitimate Qurans like we with the Bible. So a Bible in English and a Bible in German for most people is still a Bible. It doesn't work that way. But I said to him, if you want, I mean, you're in the States, if you want people to know about your religion, you have to talk to them in a language they can understand. I mean, people might want to learn about Islam, but aren't going to spend 5 years learning Arabic. And so we had this conversation, and several months later, I get a package delivered to my house. And what it was the first official sanctioned translation of the Quran into English. And now we're working on the possibility of him coming in and working with me to co-teach a class in the Quran. I'm a real beginner student in the Quran, and I've just started reading it. But that's an important element of being a citizen of the world. And if we can't be that open to that kind of inclusivity, we're leaving it on the table. I mean, there's a level of deprivation that comes when all you do is the plain vanilla stuff, you know. So that's Faiths Together. That's how it works. I took a couple of people from our church, took a training at the Baha'i Temple. So they had a whole Saturday thing where they were, it was like Baha'i 101. And we were invited and we went. And it was a wonderful opportunity and the people that we were there with were so pleased that we were there. They made us like celebrities. But we had the opportunity then over meals to sit and have a conversation about, we think, I don't know what the conversation that I was involved is, that we don't have a tradition of heaven or hell, so how do you talk about the afterlife? Mm-hmm. This is how the Baha'i look at it. This is how we look at it. So those kinds of conversations can only come out of a comfortable environment, mm-hmm. Where people show up with an open heart mm-hmm. and an open mind.
And people reaching out from both sides, their willingness to include you, your willingness to go into a space that you aren't used to. And again, finding the commonalities of just who we are as spiritual souls before we add the theology on top. And we have another comment here from another viewer in Uganda. Push Child says, thank you for the show. A holy man of God were moved and spoke from the Holy Spirit. And Vita, it's true that love is sharing. So thank you so much also, Push Child, for watching. We're so happy to have you listening today. And so Roger, I know you had another question.
Vita, as you have had these personal experiences, it seems as though your willingness to show an interest in someone else's faith tradition is the door that opens to new understanding and new growth. That's what I'm hearing because I know, for example, if someone comes to my door with a Bible in hand, my supposition is they don't want to share with me a mutual understanding. They want me to change what I do or have into what they do or have. So my perception is, this is not someone who wants to have a dialogue. Their job is to convert me. So as you enter into these new spaces and you show interest, do you feel that that's the key to opening the whole world of different theological perspectives?
It is. And I'm going to tell you, Roger, that one of the keys is to not have any assumptions about people's motives.
Nice.
So it's about active listening. It's about suspending, for me, it's about suspending any kind of judgment about right, wrong, because I don't view someone who questions me or takes a position opposite for me or different from me as threatening. I view it as a way of of seeking clarity. So when I ask a question of people and they say something, I usually say things like, can you tell me more about that? Can you tell me why you think that way? Did you bring it with you from your childhood? Is it something that you discovered in your own usually I'm talking to adults, in your own adult exploration? And so that question, tell me more about that. It usually allows conversations to evolve. And so active listening is, for me, the most powerful way to learn and to make people feel comfortable because they don't feel like they're being judged. Roger, I'm going to tell you something that I did that's really, I probably should. There were these people who go, the ones with the booklets that go door to door. And I opened the door and these two ladies were out there, and one of them asked me if I had found Jesus. And I looked at her and I said, wait, I'll get my shoes. I didn't know he was lost. I'll help you find him. And I was trying to be silly, and they got, and I apologized because I realized that I had been offensive. And it wasn't really my intention, but that was the effect. So sometimes we can go into it with the best of intentions. Mm-hmm. And if we're not paying attention, we don't realize that we've been offensive, or we don't realize that we've said something inappropriate or challenging or aggressive, passive aggressive, maybe even.
So being self-aware is really a big part of it. And it also depends on how much experience we have and the tools we have to be self-aware. I'll share very, very briefly a story from my own childhood, because I did used to go door to door. So I was probably about 12. I was in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, and it was our job, me and a girl about my age, were going door to door with literature. And I knocked on a door. It was just the two of us. The other groups were further up the street or whatever. And this gentleman opened the door, and I said, whatever the message was for the day. And he says, well, I am Muslim. I didn't even know what that was at that time. I am Muslim, and we share a lot of beliefs, actually, and a lot of the same stories from the Bible. And I was so suspicious. I was, really? Because I was raised very, very conservatively and very much off the grid. And he's like, yeah, for example, we believe in Noah's flood, and we believe in Abraham. And my world was shaken. I'm standing there at the door with the literature in my hand, just because, no one had ever even remotely explained to me that we have commonalities. It was always us versus them, and we were supposed to turn them into us. So as we learn and grow, finding the ways to listen, and, here's a real pleasant human being right in front of me, and I had a judgment immediately. They need to be saved. So it's just amazing, even from a young age, how, and now I'm on the other side of the door, so I can relate to you. So that was me.
But imagine if as a young person, you had the tool that said, tell me more about that.
Yes, right. Like the eagerness.
Right.
The questions.
And we would have then a conversation that wasn't an intellectual challenge. And, if you get into that attack defense mode, nobody gets anywhere. I mean, people tend to harden their, and I've had people accuse me of being mushy about my faith, because they say, well, you don't take a stand on anything. And I said, I don't know a whole lot. I mean, I again, that living in the question that, I don't even know what I don't know. So, and I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I don't have a problem living with that. I don't have a problem expressing that. But the certainty, and that disarms people who come to the conversation with an element of certainty that really, the way that I think about it is like a movie set that's, there's the old town, out here, and back here, there's just 2x4s holding up the wall. that's sometimes what I think happens to people. And so I think that when they get into, do not look behind what I'm telling you, just take what I'm telling you and don't force me to go behind and look what's behind. And that for that person, that's okay. Because I've seen people become totally disarmed not in a good way, when the fundamentals of their faith are questioned or challenged, or they become the questioner. It's a very fearful place for a lot of people, and that's not where I want to go with it. But sometimes that's what happens, and I've often cut off conversations mid-conversation and said, you know what, I think maybe we need to not talk about this anymore. Why don't you just live with what we've talked about for a while? And then if you want to talk about it more, we can. Or if not, we could just forget we ever had this conversation. But that kind, and people, there are people who show up at Unity who are searchers and who come from various traditions. But I've had people come up to me and say, and what are the rules? So they want to know what they have to do in order to check off the box that said, I'm doing it right or I'm doing it wrong. And I would tell people, you know what, if you need rules, this is not the place for you. You are probably not going to be happy here, because we don't live like that. I mean, our faith isn't based on that. So, but that's part of the tapestry of where we live. I mean, we live in a very diverse city, and people come here from all over the world, from lots of different traditions, cultural as well as religious, and our ability or inability to be sensitive to that is going to limit my growth.
That's brilliant.
And so I think, if I came from somewhere, Oklahoma, and I didn't have the opportunity to be exposed to all of these different things, I probably would be on a different path, and that would be okay.
Yes. I love that. I love that you said that, actually. It's so clarifying we all find ourselves in different times, different places, and our journey is different and unique, and spirit, divine, higher self, whatever you want to call that is with you to guide you in your current circumstances. And I just wanted to add, we have another comment from Heather, who's watching the show. Thank you, Heather. She says, I agree with what Vita says about active listening, but I also would have loved her joke. If she'd been standing at the door, she said, I would have laughed. I would have loved your joke. So thank you, Heather. And thank you so much for listening. We only have a few more minutes. Roger, I was going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'd like to wrap up by asking you one final question, Vita, tying it in with your quotation. So the quotation you shared was about knowing that you are rich if you are aware that you have enough. How does your awareness of having enough empower you to continue to grow and move out of the comfortable, familiar zone of what you already believe to explore something more? Or does it? Does the awareness of having enough or being enough enable you to feel free to explore?
It's not outward. And I think that may be a function of age. But I think for me, that enoughness has been a more of a journey inward. So it's been more of a journey about appreciating where I am, what I have, and seeking the lessons that are already out there for me. So one of the things I live half my time out on a ranch, and one of the things I love to do most is go out and sit under a tree and look up. And that's enoughness. Okay. I don't need to be running off to the store. I don't need to be online buying things from Amazon. That for me is enoughness. And I have it all around me. I have good health. I have it's some of what we deal with. And Roger, I've been trying to get this at class. It's some of the things we think are problems, are first world problems. So we have shelter, we have food, we're safe, we have maybe at least adequate access to medical care. So we've been relieved of those kinds of problems. And it opens the door to allow us to explore these other things. So I keep having to remind people that's a first world problem. My kids are upset because they don't have the latest digital device. That's a first world problem. Your kids got food, that is the enoughness piece. That for me is where I'm coming to. So I'm trying to learn to do things that I've wanted to do, but never thought I was good enough to do. So I'm learning how to do mosaics. I've never thought of myself as an artistic person. And I was telling one of our congregants who's an artist, she's going to give me watercolor lessons because I've always wanted to do watercolor. And back when I was 20 something, I went to the New School in New York to take a watercolor class. I signed up, paid my money. And after 2 sessions, they offered me my money back. So I decided at that point, I can't do watercolor, even though I've decided, well, I could do watercolor and it will be good enough. I just need some basic rules. And I asked Kathleen if she would help me, like just with some basics, like how do you mix colors? What do you do with the paper? And so I've begun to, in my pursuit of balance, to do some of that sort of thing. There's that whole side of me that hasn't been explored.
I love that. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, and I hope for our audience, is just the concept of enoughness. That if I start from a place of enoughness, then the possibilities for growth and fulfillment and enlightenment are ripe and all around me at all times. So
right,
thank you, Vita.
I could be a good enough watercolor. I mean, I could have.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Vita. I know we have so many other things that we'd like to ask you about. So I hope you will consider coming back and gracing us with your presence again sometime.
Absolutely.
I thank you so much. We appreciate your light to the world. And you just said so many resonant things today that really touched me. And I hope our audience too. Great illustrations and examples and the active listening being just such a beautiful, important part of that. So before we go, I want to remind our viewers to please do like and subscribe. We want to keep this coming to you. If you have social media, please share it with your friends or a family member or a friend you know at work who might appreciate a conversation around inclusive spirituality as we all grow together, have this global conversation about what connects us spiritually and focusing on what we have in common instead of specifically what makes us different. But based on our conversation today, focusing on understanding from an honest and inquisitive and loving place what makes us different, not because we're trying to fix or change people, but because we love them and we want to be close to them as a spiritual global human family. Thank you all of you who commented or asked questions today, and please continue to do that. We really look forward to seeing you each week. We look forward to seeing you on the show. We'll start recognizing your names. And this is only our 3rd episode, so we're just getting started. And you can also reach out to us with any questions or comments you might have at our email address, which is in the notes. Thank you so much for being here on I'm Spiritual But. Thank you, Vita. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you both. Roger, thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Glad you were here.
And may you all be spiritually well. Bye.
Bye-bye.